Introduce myself. My name's Tom, and I'm a friend of Hassel. I was asked by Paul to stand in. The scheduled chair who's called Thurston Crockin isn't able to be here, so I've stepped in. Hopefully that will be all right for everybody. If I can just perhaps summarise the structure of the evening. There's like 3 half-an-hour slots. So the first half an hour is that we're going to hear about the work of the Centre for Alternative Technology. We've got both Paul and Kit at the back. So we're going to have some slides from Paul to think about how we can move to a future zero carbon Britain. Second half an hour then is that we have a panel of local activists and experts around that green scene, so there's a real sense of hearing what's happening nationally and then thinking about the local action and their thoughts about how the two can connect. And then the third half an hour is the opportunity for you guys to ask any questions, and we can hopefully have a stimulating debate at that point. And then there's ample opportunity afterwards to have a mingle. I understand from Paul that there's some ideas boards around here, so if we can...
in the 30 minutes we'll let take the board. Okay, and then if everyone's interested, I think there's a sort of a plan to have a drink at the pub afterwards as well, so that will be fun. Okay, I suppose one thought I had, I was having a look at the CAT website the other day, and the sense there, which I think we'll be able to think about really throughout the evening, you know, is that the sense is that the future technology is possible, but one of the really interesting thoughts was about, you know, and a sense of the challenge about the future is how can we think about our culture, our politics, and you know, a sense of a democracy about how we can make it happen. You know, so I think we'll hear some really good, exciting, stimulating ideas. But I think we all know, you know, sort of the scale of the challenge around it. So it might be really interesting to think about that as the evening unfolds. Okay, so without any further ado, we're really pleased all the way from Wales to introduce our friends from the Centre for Alternative Technology, Paul, and as I said earlier, Kit as well, who'll be seeing around all those leaflets at the back. Okay, so want to hand over to Paul?
Thank you.
And you have to start?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Thanks very much.
Okay, my name's Paul Allen. I've worked at the Centre for Alternative Technology for 25 years. I'm an electrical engineer by training. And I've spent the past 7 or 8 years looking at all of the technologies that have been developed that can help reduce our impact on the planet. And I've been looking at how they can all be clipped together, how we can bring together and compare that with what the evidence demands we do. And in doing that, I've sort of noticed all sorts of bits of story of things to do with energy and human beings and time and futures. And what I've tried to do is to clip them all together into one coherent story, which will help you grasp what I've noticed as the extraordinary story of human beings and energy. And I'm going to sit down because most of it is up here, but listen to my voice. Can you hear me clearly at the back?
Yeah.
If you're thinking about human beings and energy, then you've got to be thinking about the sun. At the core, the sun fuses 650 million metric tons of hydrogen into helium every second. And it takes thousands of years for the photons of energy to worm their way from the sun's core to the sun's surface. But then it takes 8 minutes, 19 seconds for that to shoot out and hit the Earth. The Earth's been sitting in front of the Sun for 4.5 billion years. The first 500 million years, the Earth was a dead ball of rock, much like the Moon or Mars, and it just warmed slightly. But then, 500 million years or so into its life, photosynthesis began. That's an incredible reaction which can take this energy from sunlight, the incoming photons, and mix them with inert chemicals, carbon dioxide and water. You can't get much energy out of water. But it adds them and it creates a chemical called glucose, a sugar. Now sugars have energy embodied in them. If I tip half a pound of sugar in the water, stir it up and drink that, then I've got a lot of energy. All of a sudden it's that chemical energy that enables the growing, the reproduction of life forms. And if a tree grows to produce a square metre of wood, it locks up a ton of carbon dioxide out the atmosphere to add to the sunlight hitting the leaves, and releases about 0.7 of a tonne of oxygen. So the Earth's been like a huge solar panel that's been locking up incoming solar energy for millions upon millions of years. It's the green stuff, it's the mosses, the slime, the lichens, the leaves, all of which capture incoming sunlight and make it into their own bodies, the chemistry of their own being. And of course they are then eaten by other creatures, grazing creatures, and the grazing creatures are eaten by carnivorous creatures, and this sunlight moves its way through all of the living systems. But then, as things live and die and fall to the forest floor and begin to decompose, they take with them some of this locked up sunlight, and they capture it. And it's slowly but surely converted from dead trees, dead badgers, dead animals, to peat, to lignite, to coal. Because we call it fossil fuels, because it's the fossilized remains of living things. And in doing that, for millions of years, a huge amount of ancient sunlight has been captured, and that energy held deep beneath the earth. And it's fueled all sorts of evolution of all sorts of creatures, including us. And early human societies have been around for thousands and thousands of years, but human societies had no idea they were sitting on this bank account of ancient energy. They were living on their annual sunlight ration. And what converts your annual sunlight ration to all the things you need, like food for the beasts of burden, and the materials for clothes, and food for the children, and fuel for the fire, is soil. Soil is the incredible engine, which is why so many bloody bitter wars were fought over access to soil. Soil converts sunlight into stuff. It could power huge agrarian revolutions, huge empires, all driven by soil and sun energy that could drive armies around, mostly fighting for land, because land was like oil in the Middle East is today. It was where we get our energy, where we get our stuff. All sorts of people were employed to work on the land, and all sorts of complex relationships grew up between soil, people, and the living systems around, where we could find particular plants or particular places where we could get the chemicals we needed to process leather to make it into shoes and saddles, and tinder so we could start fires. And soil could allow us to provide food we need for our children, the hats, the buildings, everything that we needed. And of course, as the Earth is circular rather than square, it doesn't warm up equally. It warms up more in the equators and the poles. So air doesn't expand equally. So air rushes around the globe, and we could capture that moving air with sails, with canvas sails and wooden poles, to either mill corn or move things around on the sea. We could also capture falling water with wooden buckets. But we were limited to our annual energy ration until we discovered this. Now, the ancient Chinese knew of it in the 14th century, but they couldn't really work out what to do with it or how to harness its energy. It was only when the skills, resources and technologies came together at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution in Wales and the northeast of England that we began to access ancient sunlight. That meant suddenly we could have energy whenever, wherever we wanted it, in as bigger quantities as we could afford. And we began tapping into the energy below our feet. And it changed the relationship between humans and energy. But if we think of a 4.5 billion year story, this has happened very, very recently. But it changed how we live.
With the advent of coal, there was much massive movement of population from rural areas to urban areas. There was enormous suffering, enormous sacrifice on the part of ordinary people, but at the same time, of course, a massive expansion in material prosperities.
Imagine this. 100 years ago, 232,000 men were working in 620 mines. Wales supplied a third of the world's coal. Cardiff was the Kuwait of its day, exporting energy all over the empire and beyond. It was all here. Iron, lead, coal, canals, railways, the seaports. But none of this could have happened without the skills, the graft, the ingenuity of generations of working men and women.
And of course, hot on the heels of coal was oil. Oil was liquid, you could pipe it instead of having to haul it in trucks. And it was easier to refine to produce really energy-dense chemicals like petrol. So there was a massive explosion of oil wells right across Europe, right across the US, following coal. And this began to really kick-start the machine age and fired the Industrial Revolution, where we could have unlimited energy for textiles, automobiles, power plants, distribution. But very quickly the captains of industry became concerned that soon everybody would have everything they needed because they were manufacturing things at a rate they never had before. So they began thinking of clever tricks to begin to encourage to use more stuff by reshaping the landscape. One of the first things that happened in the 1920s was the sort of standardisation of the performance of a light bulb. Before standardisation, light bulbs would be lasting up to 2,000 hours, but they were standardised around 1,000 hours. They began to design things to break and reshaping the world around us to encourage us to use more energy, because energy was very profitable to produce. So as towns and cities grew from really the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, people moved in and out in horse-drawn omnibuses. It was quickly replaced by tramways, light urban railways that could move lots and lots of people very quickly, all over the north and south of England, Wales, Scotland. Tramways moved people about on masses. But what actually happened was the tramways were bought up and they were deliberately scrapped. In America, it's called the Great American Streetcar Scandal, where National City Lines was owned by car and oil companies and deliberately bought up the trams, scrapped them to encourage people, or compel people to buy a car. Similarly, the lobby of the roads industry in the UK reshaped the rail network we had. In 1963, we had all sorts of branch lines and district lines, which would be incredibly useful and incredibly popular today. But they were axed with the Beeching's Act. And in the US and in France and other countries where they closed rail lines, they kept the land in public ownership in case they ever wanted to reinstate the line. But here we sold it off and people built bungalows all over it. We built sweeping amounts of houses, but not pointing at the sun to catch the sun's heat like the ancient Aztecs, or not clustered around schools and places of work like the Victorians, but just simply following the roads. Huge numbers of very badly insulated houses because energy was cheap and very profitable to consume. But it wasn't just the physical landscape that got reshaped, it was the mental landscape as well of our heads. We were encouraged to see ourselves as defining our status by material goods. And we always wanted the latest things to upgrade, changing how we thought of ourselves and the environment. But having stuff and material goods and gold goblets goes back to the ancient Greeks, but rolling it out as a mass phenomenon for all the citizens to state and think how they are began really with this man, Edward Bernays. Bernays was Sigmund Freud's nephew. He understood Freud's theories of subconscious fears and desires of the human psyche. He crossed it with his own crowd psychology theory developed in the First World War and took it to the American corporates and said, gentlemen, I can create a demand for a product you haven't even invented yet. His first big success was rebranding cigarettes as torches of freedom to get more women to smoke by linking them to the women's emancipation leaders with some very carefully taken photographs. And as all this sort of buzz about stuff and showing stuff to state who we are. At the same time, fossil fuels became a big feedstock for the chemical industry, so we could start to manufacture all sorts of things that we'd never been able to make before, and encourage people to buy them.
Well, whether you know it or not, every single preparation on this beautiful lady's dressing table, every single thing she is wearing, is influenced by oil. Here's a string of sparklers that have never been closer to a diamond mine than the Shell Development Laboratories. The shampoo she used on her hair, her comb, the lacquer on her nails, and her makeup, all or in part have come out of some oil well. Just for fun, let's take away all these articles dependent upon petroleum. Her hand mirror, cosmetics, perfume, and manicure set made of plastics. Her synthetic silk negligee, her silk underwear. Oh, science can go no further.
So all of this gave us the power to sort of have this fossil-fueled American dream, where instead of buying stuff being a chore which costed you money, shopping became a fun activity, it became a leisure activity, and showing stuff and buying stuff and seeing other people buying stuff together became a sort of way that we enjoy ourselves, all based around the car, driving in miles to places to get the stuff. In fact, huge sort of fossil fuel road shows travelled across America, linking the muscle power of fossil fuels with sort of America's virility and male virility, and sort of leading us to sort of get excited about stuff. And it's the car at the end of the drive that is what you're judged by, not how you treat old people or treat animals. And there's all sort of fossil fuel materialistic dreams taken and very cleverly inserted into Britain in the 1950s through the advent of television and advertising. For a better start in life, start cola earlier. And of course, it wasn't just stuff, it was how we move ourselves around,